Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. Today we're going to wrap up with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. This one coming up is from Rudy. I think you will at least appreciate it on some abstract level, even if it might not be your cup of tea. I was also directed to their Bandcamp for a little bit of extra information about it. The track is Seraphic Light Part 1. By Daniel Carter, William Parker, and Matthew Shipp. Now, Daniel plays flute, trumpet, tenor sax, alto sax, and soprano sax, as well as the clarinet. William Parker plays the bass, and Matthew plays the piano. Interestingly, we don't have any percussion in here. It says Seraphic Light is an exemplary long-form work of collective creative improvisation performed by three masters of this high art. It was recorded live in the performance halls of Tufts University in Boston in April 2017. These three men each possess a complete and total devotion to the music. On this very rare trio meeting, they manifest a meditative resonance, replete with lyrical and poetic exploration throughout a sublime set. Now, this does head off a much larger art exhibit, possibly. There was an event at the university called Art, Race, and Politics in America that first screened a documentary, then had 45 minutes of conversation, basically an open panel. And after all of that, we had Seraphic Light, this performance. Part 1 is, as you can see, 21 and a half minutes. Part 2 is 21 minutes, and Part 3 is 13 minutes. So the entire event seems pretty lengthy. And it's interesting that this is what would have headed all off. I'm kind of interested to see if I can't find that 45-minute discussion Q&A, and maybe even the documentary, as it was called The Cry of Jazz, which makes me think that there's some pretty cool stuff going on in the entirety of this event. However, we're just going to be listening to part 1 of this track, of this song, Seraphic Light, and it is mostly improvisational. I'm going to assume jazz based on the event. Without further ado, let's dive into this and see what Daniel, William, and Matthew are bringing to the table today. Ooh, it started as a pretty straightforward walk down and then introduced some spicy notes. Almost went chromatic for a second. I'm trying to picture how this is played with just 3 people. But this whole thing is improvised, right? That's what it said? An exemplary long-form work of collective creative improvisation. There's some really impressive moments in here. It's not even just like a couple of beats, like a couple of bars where it feels like their minds are one. See, there are moments like this kind of devolves a bit more into free jazz, a bit less restricting on how things line up. But I think that makes the moments where things feel pre-composed even that more special. I have some tapping or something. I mentioned that there wasn't a drummer, but I guess that doesn't mean that there couldn't be percussive sounds. Definitely a bad assumption on my part. This pianist is wild. And I particularly like that, at least in this, the production of this, the placement of the notes on the piano are placed across the spectrum of the channels. It's got to be an upright bass, right? It's based off that timbre, but also the fact that I'm pretty sure it's been bowed a couple of times. Yeah, it's the raw atonality of it all. It sounds random, but it's not. It's... You know what's wild is that the piano almost feels like it's in a different, Oh. Anyway, sorry, get back on that. It almost sounds like the piano is microtonal. It's really impressive that the pianist can basically play all the notes and not feel chromatic. It feels like they're playing with more than 12 notes. It's wild. I mean, maybe the piano has been tuned to a different type of 12-tone temperament, and that certainly would... mean, those low notes, definitely leaning into some dissonance, but honestly, I would not describe most of what we've listened to so far as dissonant. It's just harmonically unusual. You know what's wild is, as much as I'm enjoying some of the counterplay in the other instruments, I think I would just take some solo piano work from this dude. Matthew? What's that phenomenon that you play so many groups of notes continuing to rise in stacks that it sounds like it's continuously rising even though it doesn't? I can't remember what that's called. But I get feelings of that in here. There's a bit of vertigo to the music, particularly with these fast piano runs. Yeah, no shade thrown towards Daniel and William. They're both fantastic at what they do, and Daniel playing brass and woodwind, just two different types of woodwind too. You got the flute and the reeded instruments. But having Matthew duck out a bit here, that's definitely where most of my joy is derived, is the piano. suppose there had to have been some point for a bit more of a noisier approach. I don't know about anyone else, but the time is flying. 14 minutes in already. Feels like we just started. Sounds so sad, but also very otherworldly. I want to expand on that later. Bringing back this idea. I'm pretty sure the pianist has done something very similar earlier in the track. I think this little moment right here in the piano is very cool. It's exploration disguised as direction, as motivated writing. I'll explain that later. There's some really playful elements of the how how they're making noise out of their instruments that I'm enjoying quite a bit. Yeah, and Rudy did tell me that the point where part one ends and part two begins is rather arbitrary. I'm going to assume the same as for two and three. It's probably less so that this song is to be understood in three parts and just that a single track of like, I don't know, 60, close to 60 minutes, give or take, just kind of looks weird, I suppose. I don't know. That's definitely not a good stopping point for the song, but it is where we are stopping this reaction. All right. I'll be honest, I was a little apprehensive going into this. Uh, I enjoy my jazz to be a bit less on the free side. I love improv with the solos, but I also really dig A sections. I'm kind of a fan of more traditional styles, but I love exploring more modern styles. It's this really weird thing because we checked out Kamasi Washington last week, and I was sort of blown away by it. Some of the ways that it was incorporating these ideas I had never heard in jazz before, and I find that to be really fascinating. But it's not something I would actively seek out. I do want to check out the rest of that album. I think that came off of one of his new ones. Um, Either that or he had a new one come out recently. One of the two. Um, I do want to dive into it, but where I'm most comfortable is older styles of jazz, which probably seems counterintuitive, and yeah, it is. Good thing our brains are super efficient at what they do and never contradict themselves. Um, but especially when it comes to free jazz, it's an area of the genre I'm just not usually a big fan of. It's very hit and miss for me. Usually miss. And so 20 minutes of pure improv, I kind of figured I was in for a bad time. Especially when Rudy had mentioned that it might not be my cup of tea. I was like, oh, okay, it's going to be a bit of a rough listen. But no, there were certainly some parts in it that I felt dragged a bit more than others, but 14 minutes went by real quick for me. I was quite surprised by that. And I finished it up and I want to listen to the rest. I kind of figured this would be a case where, like I said, I want to dive into the documentary that they showed. I want to see if I can find their open panel. And then I kind of figured that this taste, this, first third of the presentation would have been good enough for me. I wouldn't need to check out parts two and three of Seraphic Light. But now I want to. I want to experience the entire, I'm going to assume, probably 3 or 4 hour event in its totality. As close as I can. Obviously, I can't go back in time to it. But, I want to see if I can find footage of all of this and experience it back to back just as someone would have then. I really enjoyed this. It's kind of bonkers. It's not anywhere near what I usually like, but it's done in such an intriguing way. And I think that's what I want to dive into most here because I think sometimes I can change people's minds on music. Maybe you listen to something you don't like, and I might say something in my analysis that, if nothing else, just makes you appreciate it on a level maybe you didn't. Maybe you come around to it entirely. I don't think that's going to happen here, though. I don't think I can change anyone's mind on this. If you didn't enjoy it, I'm probably not going to help you enjoy it more. Maybe appreciate it at the least. But I think even then it's going to be a vague appreciation of, oh, yeah, what they did was pretty cool. Just an acceptance of that, I suppose. An acceptance of some objective element of it. So I kind of just want to get into what I think is interesting about it and what I think separates it from other free jazz. Because at the end of the day, this is three people playing a lot of stuff together, seemingly random, like a lot of free jazz tends to be. But I do think that there's some cool things going on here, and I don't know how much of it is circumstantial and how much of it is the fact that the description describes them as three masters of improvisational music. I'm going to assume it's a lot of the latter there, that their skill and experience in improvising helped form this in the way it did. I'm curious if they've ever played together. Also, I'm going to assume there was probably some warm up, some practice sessions if they hadn't played together before. Parts of this, though, it just comes together in ways that are totally unexpected. Knowing that they're all playing off the cuff, they're reading each other as they go. It's mind blowing. It really is. The first thing I want to bring up is just the sheer tonality of it. There is a lot of dissonance in here in places, particularly the piano. The pianist loves to bring in dissonant harmony in the lower side of the piano. So hitting those really low notes and a bunch of them clustered together just to create that heavy layer of dissonance as all those tones are clashing. But aside from that, are there really that many elements in here of dissonance? And I think that's what boggles my mind. I couldn't really find a harmonic center to this. I couldn't. I mean, I don't have this kind of ability, anyways, to call out chords by ear, but nothing in here really felt familiar to me either. All the harmony was sort of alien. When I bring all the notes together, the best I can say is chromatic. It really feels like they're using all 12 tones consistently. But at the same time, this does not feel like the chromatic scale. And I find that to be really, really interesting. The only other time I've heard anything like it is when we get outside of 12-tone temperament and we explore ways of tuning instruments beyond just 12 tones, especially equal temperament, which is where each note is an equal distance from the other. From a scientific perspective, looking at wavelengths. And this immediately made me think of one other very clear example that I've heard stuff like this, which is why I brought this up. There's an artist we checked out a while ago, Zaya Arrows, and she creates microtonal music and plays with some really interesting ways of tuning. In fact, I think the song that we checked out used two different tuning methods. One was like 36 notes and the other one was 20 something, and it was a custom tuning. And despite all the microtonality to it, I found it to be absolutely gorgeous in a way that sounded very foreign to my ears. Different from a lot of the other microtonal music y'all have introduced me to, which tends to, for whatever reason, focus heavily on dissonance. Zaya Arrows' music did not. It still found consonant harmony alongside the microtonal elements. I got to hear a lot of new notes in ways that were still palatable to me. And that's where Seraphic Light hits. It reminds me a lot of listening to that track. I wish I could remember what it was called. Let me look this up real quick. Oh, it's called Witchcraft. Yeah, my description of it in the title is pure microtonal bliss. And I think that's the first time in my life I ever spoke about microtonal playing in a positive light. And this gives me those same vibes. What I'm hearing is very, very fresh to me, very new. There's some sections that feel like things I have some sort of understanding for, some sort of blueprint, some sort of foundation. But there's a lot of stuff in here that is alien to me, but alien in a way that's positive. It tickles the brain in a way that works rather than saying, that's interesting, it's new, but not for me. It would take me a long time to get into that. This is immediately digestible. And I find that wild given just how much it is, how much of everything it does. Um, and so this just it doesn't happen very often, and I'm kind of giddy about it. So please ignore any of the I don't know, awkward chuckles and giggles that come out of me while I talk about this because it's exciting. It really is. Going into a bit more of the detail here. What's that phrase when you can do a lot of things? You're flexible. I don't think that's the word I necessarily want, but there's a lot of flexibility at play here. Every instrument, every musician can fill in a variety of different roles. We got rhythmic elements out of the pianist, primarily through the use of the lower end of the instrument. A lot of the times those were used with heavy accent, and those accents are going to create a rhythm against the less accented notes. But we also have emphasis through pitch. The pianist loves to do these massive, like multiple octave jumps. Play a couple notes up here, play a couple notes down here, a couple notes up here, down here, one up here, one down here, a couple notes up here, a couple down here. Um, and so this can create a groove and a rhythm within itself as well, as the brain is going to focus primarily on one of those. Those large gaps are very difficult to understand as a unified idea. So the brain's going to focus on one and view the other as embellishment to it. And so you are going to get a rhythmic pulse out of that. So the pianist can bring rhythm in there. Of course, there's harmony. The pianist is occasionally playing alongside the bass as far as providing harmonic information, but the pianist also provides harmony against their own playing, sometimes in a positive manner, and sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, with those lower notes, in a negative manner, adding dissonance to the track. And then, of course, the piano is all over the place with melody, just constantly throwing out fast moving lines. And even that jumping back and forth thing can be viewed as a melodic component and actually is a lead melody in at least one of the sections throughout this track. So, yeah, pianist, versatile. That's the word I was looking for. Not flexible. Flexible also works, but versatility. The bassist is sort of along the same lines, achieves it through a multitude of ways. One is timbre. We have the finger picking, we have tapping, and then we also have bowing. So we have three different styles that come out of that. Those create three different timbres, which create diversity within the song, which is something the pianist can't bring to the table, which is why I think they provide a lot of versatility on the compositional side of things. That's not to say the bassist does less compositional versatility. We do have walking bass lines, which is foundational. We do have rhythmic ideas. In fact, there was one time when we just sat on a pedal tone with the bow and just providing this rhythmic idea, almost like you listen to gent music, and their guitars will sit on one note, dun 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 dun, right, and provide that groove. Same thing was happening here. Um, and then the bassist does take some melody lines. moving ideas that aren't just walking. They're not there to frame out the chordal progression, whatever the chord progression might be, which is something I'm going to talk about in a second because I didn't even think about that until now. But I want to stick on this idea of versatility. So the basis has a variety of sounds and utilizes all of them in different ways in order to work on all three levels of composition. Now, our aerophone player. Oh, wait. Bass also occasionally tap their bow, probably against the body of the upright bass, but it could have been on anything, to create a percussion instrument. It's the only percussion instrument in here. I only heard it in two sections, I think, used sparingly, but I think it's interesting because I also heard bass playing, so I think there was some tapping going on in order to allow the bass to resonate notes while still tapping on something to create a percussive sound. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. Multitasking. Yeah, just phenomenal. The aerophone player though. Let me get a name for this again. Daniel. Flute, trumpet, three saxophones, and clarinet. Like I said, the chops right there are all over the place. The way that you play the flute and the way that you play the clarinet and saxophones are very different. One is a reeded instrument, one you blow air across an open hole, I guess, when you would describe it. And then the trumpet, you got to buzz your lips into a mouthpiece. So I've mentioned in the past, I can play a lot of brass instruments. I cannot play a woodwind instrument to save my life, except the flute. Reeded instruments, though, I can't make a sound out of them. Don't know. Maybe if I tried more, I haven't played one in, I've been attempting like 15 years now, but maybe more than that. That would put me at 20. That's about right. Um, but yeah, like very different uses of the muscles around the mouth, which we call embouchure. It's the way that you shape and use your muscles in order to play an instrument. Um, Lots of skill there, but also the ability to play all of them. One neat little thing here is that the flute, the sax, and the clarinet all have a lot of holes to either cover or buttons to push down and stuff like that. There's a lot of fingerings to them to play. The trumpet only has three valves, and a lot of the work in what note you're playing is all done with the mouth. In fact, if you don't hold any key down, even a basic, first time player has access to two notes there. The more that you play, the higher your octave gets. You can get up to having eight or nine, maybe even 10. I don't know what the highest note a trumpet player has ever played is, but the higher you go, the more of the notes end up being open valve. So a lot of that comes down to your mouth and your air. So two wildly different ways to play there. And yeah, the versatility I say for Daniel comes through in their ability to bring so many different timbres to play. Because honestly, thinking back on what these instruments were doing, a lot of the time they were what I would place in a more melodic uh, section, a type of lead instrument on top of everything else. Lead is sort of the wrong word to use. I kind of just want to stick with melody writing. I don't really hear too much harmonic stuff coming out of them, although they do occasionally do some like mimicking a walking bass line on particularly one of the lower saxes, which I thought was neat. But frequently it's a lead-ish kind of sound. We don't really have too many rhythmic elements coming from them either. So, yeah, the versatility I think comes from timbre, what kind of sounds they can bring to the environment, which allows the song to feel diverse and evolving. I think if it had just been, hey, I play the saxophone, 20 minutes of saxophone on top of all that, I think just would have been less interesting. I don't think it would necessarily have been bad, but I really appreciate and I put a lot of weight on having all of these sounds present throughout the track. And I think it's very important. And that's not to diminish his contributions at all either. Um, as I mentioned, even just having the skills to play all this is enough to keep me interested. But then again, to add on to what everybody else is playing, I think it's quite interesting and necessary to keep the song evolving. There were a few sections in here where we had just two of the instruments, and I don't ever think that they worked quite as well. I think the song always comes together best when all three are playing. So even if Daniel primarily brings a melodic element to the track, again, I don't think that diminishes his contributions to what's happening here at all. Now, I'd said a long time ago during the reaction, it was towards the end, and I'd said that they had disguised exploration as motivated playing. This is a key to being a good improv player. There are some times where the music just directs you and you can already see where you're going and you just have to play it. You're just thinking one or two notes ahead. Maybe you have an end goal in mind and it just feels like it's fully directed. You know exactly where you're going. You might not know exactly how you're going to get there, but you have a general idea in your mind and the end result feels almost pre-composed. There's other times that are exploratory. You can hear this a lot in Miles Davis's playing. I feel like he is just excels at kind of entering these moments when he starts poking and prodding at his mind, at the music, trying to figure out where he wants to go, what he wants to take it. Little ideas here, little ideas there, a lick here, repeating an idea here. And it is a really interesting way of improv, I think, that almost explores what could be. Doesn't really feel like it's going anywhere, but feels like it has so much potential energy. It could go anywhere. And what I find phenomenal about this is the more that I listen to all three of these, and I picked it up by the end on the pianist, but I checked out what the bassist was doing in the following minute. I didn't get a chance to look at Daniel's performance on this aspect, but at least two of the three will do this exploring, trying to figure out where they want to go next, what idea is going to work, just toying around with ideas, but they do it in a way that feels directed, like they know exactly where they're going, even though they don't. There's a confidence in it. I have no idea what's even going on here. I don't know how to put it into words. The feeling of this, I don't know. It's phenomenal. I don't think, well, I've heard musicians do this before. I mean, that's kind of the point of improv, to make it sound like you know what you're doing all the time. And some of the best improvisationers, improv jazz players, are really good at disguising this. Maybe it's an off night, they don't really know what they're doing. They might lean back on a couple of licks that are their bread and butter, but it all feels like it's going somewhere. And usually by the end, it does. But here, I didn't even really pick up on it until the end. 20, almost, I guess it was almost 19 minutes of music before I ever noticed that one of the players was poking around trying to figure out what to do next. And it clicked. I was like, wait, this has been going on this whole time. But it just feels like they always know what they're doing. Um, and there's just this raw confidence to all of it, and maybe it's a little bit of manipulation too, where a little bit of it if a little bit of it is experimentation, but it's within a larger idea that you know already works, so it feels like a natural extension more so than an exploration, more so than trying to figure out where to go from here. It's so subtly incorporated, and I think that's what honestly makes this song so interesting, is that it never really feels like it's lost. Even though these three people have no idea what the other is going to do next, where the song is going to go. It is evolving in real time alongside them, and yet they never feel like they ever have lost a footing, that they're slightly off balance. They always feel like they're in perfect control, which is a lot easier when you're one soloist over a pre-composed backing section for a designated solo section. Very different for a fully improvised free jazz jam session. And I think it's one of those things that, and I've talked in the past, that jam bands typically bounce off of me. That there might be some cool sections in a jam session, but It's not consistent enough. And I think that's where this trio comes in. They're just ridiculously consistent at finding the meat in the improv. And I don't, I mean, obviously they've dedicated their life to this. They are masters of improvisational writing. This is the payoff for that dedication, for that passion. And it just, it works. It works in a way that is just mind-boggling to me that anybody could perform at this level like this. I'm curious just how many cogs we could add to this machine before it begins to fall apart. 3 is very doable. What if we had a 4th, a 5th, a 6th, a 7th? How many people at this high of a level can we put together and have it still sound cohesive before things become just a bit too chaotic, before there's too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak? I don't know. But at least right here with these 3, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's so many moments where I couldn't tell if it was actually pre-composed or not. I have to assume it wasn't, given the description of the performance, but I mean, they're really good at making it feel like this had been rehearsed, for hours. And I think that's the missing piece for me with a lot of jam bands, is that they just don't have this level of skill, and I need it. I need that cohesion to really enjoy something like this. And these 3 have it, and just again, the work and dedication and passion they have for this type of music is, I mean, it's immediately recognizable. There's a lot of ways this could have fallen apart, and yet it never did. Now, it is called Seraphic Light. Uh, Seraphic is anything that has to do with the Seraphim, which is, from what I understand, biblically accurate angels. And I think this song does a really good job of highlighting that. Something that is very alien and foreign, yet beautiful regardless. There is maybe not necessarily disgusting is not the right word for it, but I think it's along those same lines. We don't really have a baseline for understanding the visuals of an angel. Yeah, like the caricatured one that we have, 2 wings on a generally human body, but like the biblically accurate angels, we have no foundation for understanding this. If we ever saw one, it would just be so foreign to our eyes, to our minds. And yet, by description, they are some of the most beautiful things you've ever seen. You don't know why they're beautiful. It's not traditionally beautiful based on what your life has told you is beauty. But you're in such awe of the presence of this shape of things. I think they're described to have like 6 wings and stuff. Like it's so bizarre. But it's supposed to just be immaculate perfection. That is a beautiful way of describing my experience with this track. I really don't have a lot of vocabulary to, I mean, I've said a lot of words about this, so maybe you feel differently about this. I feel like I lack the vocabulary to describe what I listen to. And generally speaking, I would find something like this very difficult to enjoy, distasteful in some ways due to the chaos and differentness of it. There would be a bit of a hurdle to getting into it, and yet here there's not. It isn't that I understand this any better than other free jazz or jam sessions that I've listened to, improvisational music, but it clicks in a way. I am in awe of what I just listened to, even though I don't get it. That's probably what it's like to see a biblically accurate angel. I think it's going to wrap this one up. Is there anything else I wanted to bring up? I feel like I foreshadowed a different another topic, and I just can't remember what that was. There was a part of me that was like, Brian, you should take notes. And then there's another part was like, I don't want to stop listening. I don't want to, put it aside for just the 5 seconds to figure out where a marker is. And like, I have to pay attention to all of this. I feel like if I miss anything, it's all just going to crumble. It felt so fragile, my experience with this, that at any moment it would stop being interesting to me. And honestly, it kind of did for a moment. The 14-minute mark, it hit a section that was a bit missed for me. But we pulled out of it and we explored something else that re-clicked with me. So that's just something that is going to happen when you are improvising. You it's not about making mistakes. I'm not going to say that mistakes get made when things are live, but you're going to explore things that aren't going to be as cohesive or as beautiful or as whatever as everything else that's been done. It's a part of making things on the go. Not having the time for drafts. This is basically a rough draft of a song where there's no chance to refine it. And through that, there's going to be things that are less refined by definition. But I mean, still the consistency of it. And it was nice contrast. I'll give it that. We didn't explore anything else like that. And the song was fairly one notes as far as tonality and expression for a while. So having that really heavy, rhythmically groovy almost section to break it up before returning back to some of the earlier sounds was probably a good call at the time. And I don't remember who led that. I think the bassist pulled us into that section. But yeah, just the sheer communication on display, the skill, raw chops, creativity, flexibility. Daniel playing like 10 different aerophone instruments. It's just awesome, honestly. And like the traditional usage of the word, not the 90s, bro, that's awesome. No, dude, that's awesome. No, like being in awe. Yeah, Seraphic Light is awesome. Those are my thoughts. Daniel Carter, William Parker, Matthew Shipp. What'd you think of this? Anything that stood out to you? Anything you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? You got your own thoughts, opinions, perspectives about this. Did you enjoy this more than you thought you would? Or maybe less than you thought you would? Maybe it sounded like it was up your alley and you just never clicked with it. Give me any of those thoughts, perspectives, and opinions down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, which is not quite as adventurous as this is. Also, I'd say not quite as awesome as it. I mean, man, how do you? Who would you? I don't think I would ever compare myself to this trio right here, but I'm also trying to think of anyone else who I could put on that same area. And I don't like putting people on pedestals. I've mentioned this in the past. People are people, right? I don't think it's worth elevating them to like a godhood status. But I mean, honestly, these three people, golly. Anyways, getting back to this, there's just like a little tangent there. Just stay on focus, brain. My music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow. We're going to finish off the minimalistic composition series theme. That's the word I want. And I think we're going to check out another special selection. So far, I haven't really seen any new music come out that interests me enough to do a video about it, so we're kind of getting backlogged on the special selections anyway, so I'm just going to go forward with that. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.